Welcome to the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Congenital Heart Surgery Database monthly webinar for today. Today is Wednesday, October the 21st. Thank you everyone for joining. On the phone with me or on the call, the webinar, we have today from STS, we have myself, Leanne Jones. We have Carol Crone. We also have Addie Dolan from the STS. From our core group team members, we have Chastity Wellness and Leslie Wacker. And then from IQVIA, we have a big group today. We've got Rhonda, Jeanette. We have some support team members with us today. We have JJ. We also have Jean and Jeffrey Matthews and Joe and Melanie. So thank you everyone for joining me today. For our agenda today, we're just going to cover our STS updates. And then once I'm done with the STS updates, I'm going to actually turn things over to Leslie and Chastity for some information, some educational info on tips for coding the non-cardiac congenital anatomic abnormalities, chromosomal abnormalities, as well as syndromes. And then once Leslie and Chastity are done with their presentation, we'll turn things over to IQVIA for their updates, and then we'll end per usual with our user feedback. So be sure to, again, include your ticket number, your case number in the Q&A when submitting your questions. All right, for our STS updates, first off, we have the 2020 harvest update. As you all are aware, the harvest submission deadline has been extended. It was originally scheduled for Friday, October the 16th. We still have not determined a harvest close date yet. That will be coming soon. An email notification regarding the harvest extension was sent out to the CHSD community on Tuesday, 9/29. So that was sent out to all of our primary data and file contacts, our surgeon representatives, as well as our backup contacts. So if you did not receive any communication, or if you're having issues receiving communications from me, please feel free to just email me directly, and I can try and work with you to see why some of those communications are not going through. Sometimes it's firewalls, at times it's just hard to determine. Also, we do have the ability to add a second email for you. I know some of our data managers have included a personal email address, such as a Gmail address. Please know that we don't use that email for anything other than STS communications, and that has been able to allow some of our data managers to get communications from us that have normally they've not been able to receive. If you do have a second email address you would like to update, you can either email me directly, lee.jones@duke.edu, or you can complete a participant contact form. Is probably the quickest and easiest way. Fill out a participant contact form with that secondary email address for you, and then we can get that information updated. Next off, we have our clinical question review is actually still in progress for the month of October. We have had a very high volume of questions post AQO, and I did want to let you know that some questions have been responded to, others have not. We're going to have 2 core group calls this month. We did have a call last week. We were unable to finish the questions last week, so we are working to have another call this week. And I'm sorry, so just please note that the core group will have another call hopefully this week, and we will get responses out as quickly as possible to those questions. So please know that we are working on this. And thank you, Jeanette. I think I gave out my old email address. So if you have questions or want to get a secondary email address to me, it's ljones@sts.org. I'm so sorry, ljones@sts.org. I apologize for those of you who may not be aware. I worked at Duke prior to coming over to STS for quite a long time, so I apologize for any of the confusion. Next over, we have our AQO wrap-up, and I just wanted to, again, thank everyone that attended AQO. We did have approximately 850 attendees. That was our highest AQO ever. So again, thank you all for joining. Also, just a reminder that all AQO sessions will be available within the platform for an entire year. So they will be available for review up until next AQO, which will be hopefully in Denver next year. So we're hoping that we are able to have a live and in-person AQO next year. Just a reminder, for CE credit, it must be claimed by December 31st of this year. So even though the sessions will be available all year, if you want to claim your continuing education credit, it must be claimed by December 31st. Also, just a reminder that you do have to review all of the sessions, and your evaluation must be completed at one time. So you have to review all the sessions and complete your evaluation at once for all the sessions, and then submit your all of your information by December 31st. Also, if you were unable to attend the AQO meeting, access to the program will be available for purchase in late November. So again, access to the program will be available for purchase in late November via the STS Learning Center. Also, just a quick update regarding the congenital upgrade that is currently in progress. Again, we are in the beginning stages. We've had 2 calls so far. We had a call Monday night with our group, and we were covering, again, the non-cardiac anatomic abnormalities, as well as the chromosomal abnormalities and the syndromes. And based on our discussions from Monday night, we had determined that there needed to be just a little bit more education on how to code those abnormalities and syndromes. So I'm going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie here in just a second to provide us some information with some tips on how to code those those abnormalities and syndromes. So, and again, just a reminder, if you have any you can email me any upgrade suggestions for the current upgrade. You can email me at sorry, that is my wrong email address. You can email me at ljones@sts.org. And again, it's ljones@sts.org. I'll make that correction. And again, our go live is scheduled for January 2022 for the congenital upgrade. And with that craziness of a update, I'm going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie for their presentation on abnormalities and syndromes. Chastity, Leslie.
Thank you, Leanne. As Leanne has said, Leslie and I are working with the select members of the task force and the upgrade committee, bringing a data manager's perspective to their conversations and what they want to include or take out. And so again, just as a reminder, if there are things that you would like to see changed or updated, or maybe definitions that you struggle with, please feel free. You can just email Leanne or myself or Leslie or all 3 of us. It's a party. And just kind of let us know, just so, you know, we have a pretty good idea of how data managers feel since we're data managers ourselves, but all of your input would be greatly appreciated as we go through this process. So as you know, the upgrade is in progress. And what we reviewed this past week was the non-cardiac congenital anatomic abnormalities, the chromosomal abnormalities, and the syndromes. And so you know that the last upgrade, these sections were highly changed and had many new fields, and especially with the chromosomal abnormalities. So what we looked at was for all the places where we're putting in free text under other, anything that has been coded greater than or equal to 10 times is being considered for inclusion. So maybe a specific abnormality or syndrome, people are writing in over and over and over and over. And so we're definitely taking a look at those and considering them for inclusion. And there are a few on our list already. Then there are many that have never ever been coded at all. And so they're on a watch list, if you will, and we'll look at those for future elimination later to just make the list, I think, a little bit less large, I guess, to go through to try to find your specific syndromes or abnormalities. And so Leslie and I just wanted to go through and give you some data manager tips and what we saw when we were looking at some of the others. And in some areas, there's some missing data. So people aren't filling out these anatomic abnormalities and things at all. And so just a reminder that these all fit into the risk adjusted mortality rate or the risk models. And so it's an important section to complete. If you say none, at least then it's not missing and it won't show up in the missing category. Then it just concerns us that maybe people aren't filling these out or don't understand the importance of them. And then on the other hand, there are just some places where you're writing in things in the other category that actually belong in other areas that, others in these sections might not necessarily be included in the risk model, whereas if they're included in their appropriate sections, could give you some risk in the risk model, if you will. So for the non-cardiac congenital anatomic abnormalities, these should be true anatomic abnormalities, hence the name that they're anatomic. So this should not include syndromes or things that belong elsewhere, but truly be reflective of something that is anatomic of the patient. And likewise, same with the chromosomal abnormalities. The others definitely should include things like deletions and duplications on the short and long arms of the chromosomes, exactly like you guys are doing. There are thousands of those. And so continue to do that. But two big things that we noticed under chromosomal abnormalities were factor V Leiden deficiency. And this is actually in the definition of the coagulable state in the pre-op factors. So if you go back and look at that definition, which was updated in the last data spec upgrade, you will see that coagulable state includes if you have any of these certain conditions, and factor V Leiden mutation is one of the things that is mentioned there. So and rather than writing in other, where you would receive no credit under chromosomal abnormalities, if you move this to pre-op factor coagulable state, it ends up in the risk model. And then likewise, under chromosomal abnormalities, there were many people who included cardiac diagnoses, and these should be moved to your cardiac diagnoses section. And so one of them that was noted multiple times under chromosomal abnormalities was cardiomyopathy. So again, include that in your diagnoses section and not under your chromosomal abnormalities. And next slide, I think, is Leslie.
Yep, great. So a lot of the things that we saw were coming from the syndromes section. And so we just wanted to highlight a few of those issues or inconsistencies that we were seeing. So some of the EP and arrhythmia codes that used to be under syndromes were eliminated with the last version upgrade, 3.41. But we're still seeing people select other and free text in things like sick sinus or long and short QT syndrome. Other things that we're seeing are notes about maternal factors, maternal GBS positive, things like that. And those should really be included in the pregnancy complication other section. There's not going to be a free text there for you to type in, but it's available for you to check the box. Other things that we're seeing in syndromes other are diagnoses codes like HLHS, Shone's syndrome or Shone's complex, and Scimitar syndrome. Those all have diagnosis codes that can be used, and that would be a better place to capture it. Tethered cord can be captured in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking, I'm sorry, NCAAs. And then I think that is just a tip for everyone is just to make sure that you're using the specs document or the training manual. So if there's something you want to code, but you can't find it, make sure you're doing, a control F in either of those documents and looking for something applicable. It just might be in a different section. And then finally, just an overall general tip for everyone is to avoid documenting things in any field if it's just noted in your medical record as possible. So that's it from us. We'll turn it back over to Leanne.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Chastity, Leslie. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you taking the time to come up with this presentation and helping to provide some education. Again, I just wanted to apologize to everyone for my wonky start there. I'm sorry. I'm still laughing at myself for getting so flustered and giving out the wrong email. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Joe next, and we'll start off with our IQVIA updates. Joe?
Great. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to be going over some items that were released on October 10th, a couple weeks ago, starting with some enhancements that were made to the harvest summary report. So we did add the total number of cases and the surgical date range to the top of the display for that harvest summary report. And there is a small screenshot there, but you can get an idea based on the red box where that information should be appearing now when you utilize that report. Next, we had some updates for the missing variable report. And that is on the next slide, please. Thank you. So that starts with STS 3560. We had a unique situation specific to a single site with two specific records where the surgeon name was showing up on the missing variable report, even though it was present on the form, and that should now have been resolved. STS 3565, CPBTM, and a few other data elements were identified as not appearing on the missing variable report, even though they were missing. And so that has been updated so that those appear properly. STS 3407, the missing variable report was showing the valve explant model number for the fourth explant was missing, even though there was not a fourth explant. And so that has been fixed, so that should no longer come up. STS 3609 and 3225, for both of these have to do with the autologous transfusion item appearing on the report. That was showing up as missing, even though it was on the form for version 3.3 records. And so updates had been made to the logic to check against the appropriate items to make sure that that shows up when it should. And then finally, STS 3587, the transfusion of blood products after 24 hours post-procedure was showing up, even though the question had been answered in the user's vendor system. And so we did look at that and get that corrected a couple weeks ago as well. All right, next slide. All right, and these are a few items that are currently under review. We don't have a fixed date for these yet, but they are being looked into, starting with a couple for the uploader, SCS 4055. We are working with specific sites, and this is on a site-by-site basis. For people who have reported this particular issue, it seems to be that the data quality report is saying that more records were updated than sites believe actually were. And so, for example, the upload history is saying that there were 30 of 30 records, even though the site believes that they only made updates to 5 of them or something like that. And so if you do experience that, let us know and we can look into it. Again, we are looking into this on a site-by-site basis to see what's going on at this time. So let us know if you're experiencing any difficulty or any confusion regarding that piece. STS 4295, autologous transfusion is not updating on the case form. So this was one site that has reported this so far that we're looking into. They submitted a DAT file that did contain data for autologous transfusion. And even though they uploaded that, the item was not updated on the case. And so we are looking at their DAT file to try to determine what might be going on with that. In regard to the missing variable report, STS 4296, we did get a report that the Humate-P units dose 3 variable was showing up as missing in situations where the Humate-P units dose 2 was set to 0. And per the data specifications, if that's 0, then 3 should not be required. So it should not then appear on the missing variable report. So we're looking to update the logic and make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. And then the last item here is for the dashboard report, STS 3873. We did have a site report that they believe there's a discrepancy between the total number of records displayed on the dashboard and what they're seeing to be the total number of records in their vendor system. So we are looking into things on our end to make sure that the dashboard is displaying the appropriate number. So if you do experience that, again, this is something that we've only had a report from a single site, but if you do experience anything like this, please let us know and we can take your situation into account as well. All right, and there's one note there at the bottom, just if you do have any tickets or if you've submitted tickets that we did not discuss today, please rest assured that they are under review and we will follow up with you in regard to resolution and target release date confirmation to let you know when those are fixed. And you are always welcome to contact us if you'd like an update. And I believe that does it for my piece. So I'll turn things over to Melanie.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. It's Melanie. Let's go ahead and talk about these upcoming reports. So the first one that's on the way is the primary procedure mismatch report. We did have additional working sessions with DCRI and STS based on feedback that we received. And so that update to logic is currently being tested. So that will be going through a round of UAT testing, and I'll give a little bit more context of what else is going on with that report in the next slide. But for now, that is targeted. We do have it slated for October. And then after that, of course, the next report that will be available is going to be the risk adjusted dashboard. Right now, we're still in the concept phases with requirements related to that, but that will be an available report once we are able, of course, to collect that data, close the harvest, send that over to DCRI for analysis. Once we receive that information back, that data back from DCRI, we then will surface it in a new report. So that is the current update there. So let's go to the next slide. Just to give a little bit more background of course, what's happening with the primary procedure mismatch report. We've had working sessions over this time period to review the rule exclusion requirements. And some of the outcomes of these sessions is that we got the definitions in regards to how DCRI conducts their generation of that report. So it is done differently than what we are currently implementing. So with that, we had to discuss, of course, those solutions. And with that, we were able to determine how we're able to verify the logic and also verify the way that the logic will iterate through the cases. And so that basically aligns us with what the rule expectations are and what's being presented on the report. One of the things that we do at IQVIA, or we do not do at IQVIA within the report, is change any of the data, which is different than DCRI when they are pulling that information into analysis. There are codes that are set to missing in certain instances if it doesn't meet certain criteria. And basically, they have steps to prepare that data in order to generate the report. And we handle that a little bit differently. So we were able to work with them and also with getting feedback from STS to determine how that should be processed. So all of that basically has gotten to a point where we're testing that, and we will be opening that back up to our beta users so that they're able to use their production information to then generate the report. So that's where we are at the moment. Communication will be sent out from STS to the beta group once the green light is given from IQVIA. So we are still in progress on that, but just wanted to at least give an update of where we are on that report. And the next slide, let's see what we have. We're going to cover, I think, the harvest close. Yes, harvest checklist. So we've covered this before, but sometimes, of course, we may have new users that join these calls. So we just want to make sure that in preparation for harvest close, that we give you the steps that you should be taking to get prepared for when the time comes and you need to get everything, of course, ready to go. So the first thing, of course, is to go ahead and upload your operations, and that's already been in progress. You all have been uploading that information to the database, and with that, the first point of contact in regards to looking at your data and cleaning it up is the data quality report. And the data quality report, the initial items that should be immediately addressed are, of course, the critical errors. And if you encounter any critical errors, please understand that those records that have been flagged with a critical error will not save to the database. So it's really important that you review that report, identify those operations, and then see why those are being prevented from being saved to the database. Once that's done, if there are any other associated errors or warnings, you of course would resolve and review those. And so the next step after reviewing that data quality report, and let me just take one step back. With the data quality report, remember it's submission by submission. So each time you submit a file, that is when you would get the data quality report results for that specific submission. And so anything that was loaded at that time will provide feedback within that submission. There is another report that will allow you to review all records during a certain surgical time period. So I'll come to that report, but just understand the data quality report in this instance, it's looking at each submission. Next is the next report that you could review is the critical summary report. And that critical summary report is available within that data quality report submission. And so when you navigate to the data quality report, there are two tabs at the bottom left corner of that actual report. One is data quality and the other is critical summary. And the critical summary will require you to put in the submission time frame, not the surgical time frame. So this report is different than the others where it's generating off of the date of your submission. So please keep that in mind. So once you enter in that time frame of submission, you will be able to see the raw data information in regards to what's the first surgical date range that begins that file and what's the very last surgical date that's within that file. And you will also be able to determine if files were successful and also if files had a failure. So the critical summary is going to give you that overview so that you're able to see that at a high level glance of each of your submissions. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The next report is the harvest summary report. The harvest summary report is the report that's going to allow you to review all of your validations that are outstanding on any operation. And this will allow you to enter in a surgical time frame and go ahead and review that particular data set. And so you're able to then see if there are any outstanding warnings or errors that should be addressed for those records. The next report that you would then review is the missing variable report. And the missing variable report will give you the feedback related to items that have been flagged as missing, and you're able to also see the missing percent of how many records are missing that particular variable. So again, this is driven by surgical date range. So once you enter in that surgical time frame, you're able to review those actual records. If you see that there are items that are missing, and you need to update that information within the platform, please remember to go back to your software vendor system, update those cases or operations that are missing those values or variables, and then export that file and upload those corrections to the platform. Okay, and that's how you're able to update the information within the system. And the next slide, let's take a look at the next set of reports. This slide has been updated, so just wanted to, and this was updated the last time we met. So it's the same information, but again, we just wanted to make sure that if you did have a previous version, and this is also posted to the library in the platform. So please, if you'd like to get a copy of this information, we have posted this to the library and you're able to get this information there also. The next set of reports is going to be the case analysis for mortality inclusion, and that's currently available. And then we have primary procedure, which we just talked about, so that's coming. So going back to the case analysis, this is again driven by surgical date range. And this is going to allow you to review cases that have been flagged as ineligible due to specific missing variables. On the report, it does notify you to let you know which fields the report is specifically going to review, and it will provide feedback on those actual fields. Once you review that information, updates that have to be done, again, have to go back into your software vendor system. And at that point, once the updates are made, you would then export and then re-upload that file. And we touched on again primary procedure. Once this is available, this report will allow you to see that comparison of what was selected as the primary in the operation and what is recommended based on the concept of having the highest stat score and of course incorporating any rule exclusion to those cases. And so it will propose an actual STS primary procedure for you to review. And let's go ahead and also just wanted to call out, sorry, Leanne, I just wanted to also call out that, again, on certain instances, there may be times in which the software may not match the primary procedure that's ultimately assigned by DCRI at the time of analysis. Like we said, they do a little bit of their processes are a little bit different than what is done on our side, but we are executing those rules where we are not removing or setting items to missing to basically give you those results. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And then the very last step is what we call reviewing the full picture. So now that all of these steps have been accomplished, you would then access the CHSD participant dashboard report. And this report is a non-analyzed view of your data. Okay, the analyzed data set will be coming back once that's done by DCRI, and that will be a separate report. But this report is showing you the raw, unadjusted data for you to be able to review what's currently in your actual site. And here you're able to determine, based on the parameters that you've selected, the dates, the procedures, the age, whether or not it's an index operation or not, you're able to then review that information and view things such as the operation types that are currently captured within the database, mortality status at hospital discharge, status at 30 days after surgery. If you needed to get those pieces of information, then you would use this to be able to see the full picture of everything that you have within the database. And I think this is the last step. Let's go ahead and just go to the next slide. I think it may be the support plan. Right. So I will stop there. And please, just a quick reminder, if you want those steps, it is posted to the library. And of course, it'll be in the presentation that will be posted by STS. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. That was awesome. Great review. So next, I'm just going to touch on IQVIA support plan. Again, you all are very familiar with this slide and the remaining slides. Just again, a friendly reminder, when you do contact IQVIA support, as well as STS, please do include your participant ID number with in any and all communications with IQVIA and STS. And again, for congenital, for those that may not be aware, for our newer participants, your participant ID number is a 5-digit number. And for congenital, that number should begin with a 5. If the congenital participant IDs are a 50,000 series number. So again, please be sure to include that participant ID in any and all communications with IQVIA and STS. Here on the slide, you can see we have the IQVIA number for tech support as well as their email address. Again, please feel free to reach out to IQVIA with all of any issues regarding your data file submissions and questions regarding data quality reporting, dashboard reporting, and things like that. Next, we have a list of resources that are available to you out on the STS website. We have our STS National Database webpage, and again, out on that database webpage, you'll find our database feedback form, contact information, webinar information, FAQ documents, our Go Lab checklist, tier level support documents, as well as any training videos, and also a link to IQVIA, to the data warehouse for data submissions. Again, here is my contact information with the correct email address this time. If you need to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at any time via phone or email. Email is quickest to contact me. Feel free to email me with any questions regarding the database. If I don't know the answer to your questions, if I cannot answer it, I will get you in touch with the appropriate staff person. If you have any questions regarding contracts, payments, participant contact information, please feel free to reach out to us at stsdb@sts.org. And again, that's stsdb@sts.org for any overall database operational questions. Next, I'm going to turn things over to you all for our open discussion. But quickly, before I start with the questions, I just wanted to remind everyone our next congenital webinar. Webinars are scheduled for November the 3rd. We have our next user group call at 12 p.m. Central. And then we also have our next monthly webinar scheduled for November 17th at 12 p.m. Central. So again, just mark your calendars accordingly. So again, we're going to turn things over to you all for our Q&A. Just please know that we do encourage your feedback and we want to hear from you. And please, if you've already submitted your question to IQVIA tech support, please be sure to include your ticket number. It should be a RITM number. That way, tech support can actually start looking at the questions ahead of time and hopefully pull your specific ticket up and we can address your items while we're on the phone. So if everyone's ready, I think we'll go ahead and start with our questions. Let's see here. Our first question, it says, we use the free text and syndrome other to catch things for internal use like maternal GBS positive, fetal tobacco exposure, and the relationship of the family members with CHD and what type they had. Is this still okay?
I'm happy to take that, Leanne, if you want. This is Chastity.
Oh, yes.
Yes, absolutely. You can continue to capture things like that. Some of those things might be under consideration for inclusion, such as fetal tobacco exposure as maybe moving up to the maternal risk factor or the pregnancy risk factors in the database. But yeah, I mean, you can continue to use the free text. We were pointing out more things that you likely weren't including in other areas where you would get credit in the risk model. And so you want to make sure, like the factor V Leiden mutation and things like that, that you're getting credit for that under pre-op factor. So we're not telling you not to use the free text fields. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Chastity. Our next question, looks more for IQVIA. Any updates on this question? Is there a way to filter out mortalities by op type? If not, is it available in the platform elsewhere? And I don't think we have this function available yet. Jeanette, Mel?
Hi, it's Mel. Oh,
Go ahead, Mel.
I can answer. So we do not have, I think we talked about this the last time we met, and we are looking at how we can add as an enhancement. That's currently not available, Kelly, but we do have it on the list.
Right. Great, thank you. Our next question, any updates? Again, this is from Kelly, and she's got the RITM number. I know she's submitted this ticket, assigning index procedures to organ procurements, and I know we are talking about that as well. No, I know that's a work in progress too that we have in discussion.
We do need, yes, and we do need to get further clarification on that, correct?
Yep. So that is something that we are working to address, Kelly. And again, regarding parent-child fields, for example, if op type is not CPB cardiovascular, but CPB time is documented, does the IQVIA platform have the functionality to notify us of such? If not, how will this be handled at DCRI? So I don't know, Mel, in the data quality report, are you guys reporting? So this is obviously it's a parent-child relationship. They should only enter CPB time if it's an op type 1, 9, or 6, which is CPB cardiovascular, CPB non-cardiovascular, or bad with CPB. Are we reporting if they fill out CPB but the parent, they don't answer the parent but answer the child? Are we reporting that to them?
I would think that would be a warning, but I have to check. I went ahead and I just took that question down, and I will have to double check.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Leanne, is this something though that can be addressed with their vendor? Like the specs are written and you shouldn't be able to enter that?
True. That is very true. That's a great point, Mel.
At least for that
Leslie.
specific one. If there's other examples, Kelly, then,
true.
Shoot them out there. But I think with that one in particular, depending on, it could just be a vendor issue that the spec, because the vendor should be writing in all those things into the specs. Or using the specs to write it into the software.
True. That's true. That's a great point.
Good point, Leslie. This is Carol. I think we need to, if that's happening, I think this is a parent-child issue. Is that what, am I understanding correctly? So we probably have to maybe have that vendor reach out to Paul for clarification on how the specs, if they put a change through, we need to know about that. If the vendor put a change through, after they got certified or after our certification process. then we'll
Right.
need to have that vendor reach out to Paul, because that shouldn't be allowed.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. All right. Our next question from Peter. Let's see here. With all the fixes changes being put into place, is it a problem to periodically upload our entire harvest file, excuse me, to see if any new issues or errors arise?
This is Jeanette. I can take that one. Peter, if you've not made any changes or data corrections in the records on your side, then when you submit the whole file again, the system is going to note that, hey, there were no changes, so I don't need to rerun the records that we already have that are unchanged. So while you could submit the whole submission file again, we would notify the community if there was any issue that would require a new submission, and there haven't been any to date. So if you would like to resubmit your file, you can, but that wouldn't really be required. Now, if you wanted to periodically, look at the reports, there have been some fixes that only impact the way data is displaying in the reports. They wouldn't change anything or prevent you from submitting data into the system. So you may benefit from, say, just rerunning the missing variable report after a fix is posted, and you wouldn't necessarily need to resubmit your data again. Hopefully that clarifies. If not, please post another question in the chat. And Melanie, is there anything you'd want to add?
Sorry, I was on mute. Nope, you covered it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. All right. Our next question, and I think we've discussed this before, but is there any vision to merging some of these reports used for harvesting into one report rather than having to run multiple reports to access? This process has become tedious and time consuming. And I believe that we have discussed this before. We're always constantly looking for ways to improve and to enhance the data manager experience. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, but I do know that we have been in discussion, we're always looking to improve and make your enhancement better, your experience better.
And I'll chime in also, Leanne.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to take that feedback. One of the reports that you will see that will be combined is the primary procedure determination, that mismatch report, and also the case inclusion. Those actually are going to be together. So we're looking at reports that can be associated and be, a single access point rather than having multiple. But in some instances, like the DQR, for example, that is a standalone report because that's based on each submission. But we did combine, for example, on that report, the critical summary. So we are listening to the feedback that you all are giving us, and we are trying to, of course, see how we can align where those reports would make sense to combine and make the workflow easier.
Great, thank you, Mo. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to add? Thank you, Mo, I appreciate that. Our next question says, when there's an, you're welcome, Wen. They said, yeah, Ren just commented, combined reports are appreciated. So we hear you, we understand. Our next question, when there's an expiration date within the 365-day window, does this become the last follow-up date? And do we enter the mortality date and status at last follow-up as dead? Have we answered this, Chastity, Leslie, within the training manual?
I think so. I'm just rereading it. I'm not sure if I totally understand it.
Yeah.
I think they're saying if you put in that there's an expiration that has occurred in that 365-day window, is that then your last follow-up date that you should go to the other section and fill out the last follow-up date, mortality status, and New York Heart score? So
yes,
absolutely, you can do that.
Yeah.
It won't automatically do it.
Right.
But that's where, when I find out a patient died, no matter whether inside or outside of that 365-day window, I go fill out that section of long-term follow-up.
Yep, same.
Excellent. All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. Beth had put a question in the chat, so I don't want to miss this, but she said, is heterotaxy and situ inversus appear both in the syndromes list and the diagnosis list? Are we to code them in both places?
Yes.
Yes, when it's applicable, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to miss that question in the chat, so. Okay. Our next question, what tools do we have to assess data inconsistencies in regard to harvesting? Is there a report that chronicles this? I don't, Mel, team, do you all have,
This
I know,
is
I wonder,
Jeanette.
go ahead, Jeanette.
So we do, if you could maybe go back to the harvest checklist, Leanne, that might be helpful to sort of show what the sections are and what is relevant. So the harvest summary report gives perhaps the most succinct view of all of the outstanding data validations from what may be multiple submissions that you've worked on during the course of your harvest. So as shown here, we do recommend reviewing the harvest summary report. The missing variable report will also show data related to any missing variables, which can indicate some data inconsistencies. In particular, if perhaps you've got a patient who's marked as deceased, but then there's a missing mortality date, that would not necessarily show as missing if the relevant parent fields had not been filled out. So there is some visibility there. If you could go to the next slide, Leanne.
Yes, ma'am.
Any inconsistencies here, so the mortality inclusion report, this would indicate for you whether any mortality related variables were missing. And then of course, once the primary procedure mismatch report is shown, that would show any inconsistency in the primary procedure that was assigned versus the rule set that are recommended by STS and DCRI. Next slide, please.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
And then the participant dashboard report also shows sort of summary information related to your submissions. So it'll give you quick views into, say, the counts of your mortalities, the counts of particular procedure types, and let you kind of look at your data set, which you may sort of know off the top of your head. Maybe in June of this year, that you had a particular volume of cases, and you can kind of profile some of that data for a date range of your choice. So you could put in just a month or a quarter or the whole year in order to sort of see that summary view of your data before it goes for analysis.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. And Heidi also provided an example. She had a data inconsistency this past weekend. One of her patients was still marked in-house, even though the discharge date had been inputted, the discharge data had been inputted. Nothing flagged to say it needed correction. And I just wanted to, encourage your internal vendor software should also have internal validation checks. So I would think these things should be captured, internally prior to submitting, to the data warehouse. The data warehouse, we provide these checks and validations and things like this, in addition, after you should already have run your internal validation checks within your software prior to submitting the data. So this should be like your third backup, your second or your third backup to your data quality validation and checks. But if your vendor software doesn't have those types of validations, or I would definitely talk to your vendor to see, about getting that those types of checks installed within your software. Carol or Chastity, Leslie, anyone?
Yeah,
Do you have anything to add?
This is Carol. I'm a little concerned about this one. So I'm assuming that this would be episode care patient in hospital, which is sequence 4210, and that was marked yes, none of those fields beneath that would have opened up. So 4220, 4230, 4240, all the way down to 4280 should not have opened. So
That is true, Carol, but
you on at
Yeah.
your level. Now, status at 30 days is going to open up, but you just need to, you need to abstract those correctly and make sure if you stopped there at episode of care, you shouldn't be going, patient still in hospital, you shouldn't be going on further. Sorry, Leslie, what were you going to
Right.
add something?
so that is true. That is the way the specs are written, but it is not actually how it's been working for, I think, any vendor, to be honest. It was a known issue that that parent field was not working correctly after our last upgrade, even though that was the intention. What you're saying is correct. We intended it to be, yes, they're still in house, and so then you don't mark any discharge fields, but that is not how it is working.
Let me check this out.
Huh.
Well, because what ended up happening is I think the intent of the field was to be able to say you're in-house or in long-term care, correct? And so then,
Well, the question is just patient remains hospitalized during this episode of care, yes or no?
right. So, but if you say yes to that, that could imply that you have hospital discharge, but not discharge from the long-term care or other acute care hospital. And so you don't have database discharge. So I'm able to say, I think though I have to get the discharge to open up, I essentially have to say no to that question. If I say yes, then this was lost in translation to vendors and how the spec was written.
How do we have how the spec, because this should actually be patient remains in acute care during this episode of care. And that answers if yes, then we don't fill in any of those other fields. Is that how
Right.
it's supposed to be interpreted?
So, no. So you're correct. If you say yes, the patient remains hospitalized during this episode of care, you cannot discharge them from the hospital. However, episode of care signifies if you transferred to long-term care or another acute care hospital. So the episode of care on that is not the same as hospitalization. And so it puts data managers in a quandary. So you want to put in your hospital discharge.
And date of hospital discharge for hospital discharge date, that's from not if that patient gets transferred, not from the transfer hospital, it's from the operation center.
Right, from our hospital.
From our hospital, yes. So the problem is, if you answer remains hospitalized during this episode of care, you can't put in a hospital discharge date.
So
but
what
for episode of care, you can have a valid hospital discharge date.
Yeah. So
what Heidi is saying, it should not be even though we know there's an issue with these fields, what Heidi is describing, it might be specific to her vendor, because it should, if you say yes, you shouldn't even be able to say, she shouldn't have been able to enter the discharge data.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's two issues, that one, Leslie, and then the one that Chastity brought up about when patients are discharged from your acute care at your hospital and they're either transferred to long care status or they transfer to another acute care hospital. So I think we need to address it in the upgrade in this section.
Yeah, we definitely have an upgrade issue, but I think Heidi's software shouldn't allow her to put in.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Right.
That's an unfortunate deal that her vendor.
Right.
And then for Jennifer's question, which is similar, it's for both.
Go ahead, Leslie.
For Jennifer's question, it's for anywhere. It's just signifying that they're still hospitalized.
Correct.
Right. Great. And Heidi, if you have issues, with your vendor and your vendor has specific questions, they can reach out to Paul at IQVIA if needed. So please, make use of Paul if you need assistance with your vendor. And Heidi's saying it was a long-term care episode, transfer of care, et cetera. And the only way I was notified of it was a case showing as ineligible. Having the inconsistent report as we listed on the DCRI DQR would be helpful.
I think the hard part is it's vendor inconsistency, right?
Right. Right.
And the vendor should be built to the specs, which is why the rest of us just say
Right.
the field is wrong.
Right. Right. Excellent. Okay. Let's see here. We are just about at the hour. I do not have any other questions coming in. Oh, you're welcome, Heidi. It takes a team, it takes a village a lot of times. So we're here to help. So let's see here. I think that is it. Like I said, I don't see any additional questions coming into the Q&A, and we are just about at time. If you all have any additional questions or any follow-up questions that we weren't able to get to today, please feel free to email them to me directly, and we can work with the core group and the surgeon leaders to get questions answered as necessary. With that, I just wanted to thank everyone for your time today. If anyone has anything to add before we leave, I just hope you guys have a nice week, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, IQVIA STS team. I appreciate the assistance. Chastity, Leslie. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.